area, but the other one, make it over. She reads. I know all of the time. Okay. That's what the section is. Yeah. Okay, welcome to Discipleship Training. That's Miss Barbara. 2 Samuel 20. So we're just going to be kind of following along in there. And she doesn't really have the scriptures down for me. So if you see the scriptures mixed up, I'm not reading the scriptures. I'm just reading what she gave me. So, but we're going to be in that same section. Um, okay, so first we were talking about, you remember, was it Amasa that got killed? Maybe the name's right. Anyway, he got killed and he was the one that took Joab's place. And so now all that is over with, and Joab is going after Sheba. So we're going to be talking about Sheba. Um, let's see. Let me get where I'm supposed to start. Okay. There's a recurring lesson in his life. Ability is not the same as godliness. So we're talking about Joab here. So even though Joab had a lot of ability, he was brave, he was competent, he was successful, but he repeatedly placed his own agenda above David's authority. So we're kind of going to find out about Joab, and it doesn't go real well with him in the end because he's not a believer and he's not following the Lord. So another spiritual lesson we can learn from this is how quickly, I thought all this was important, and we kind of went over it really quick at the end last week, is we see how a strong personality can seize control when people value results more than righteousness. Right. So they valued the results Joab was giving him, and it wasn't that Joab was wrong about some of it, although he was wrong about probably half of it, but in the way he did it. But I thought of, like, politically, what do we vote for? We vote more for the results than anybody that's going to be a righteous leader. And so I thought it was good. They said people that are gifted, but not righteous, or dependable, are not good examples to others. So then you've got somebody that's an example, right, in front of everybody, a president, a king, or whatever, or Joab to his military men. So they're just like blindly following him without even questioning anything he's doing. It says, haven't we seen that in presidential elections? And of course, you can sure think of Hitler. He had a very strong personality, and he literally seized control of an entire nation, and it was not for righteousness, and he convinced them to murder and steal and destroy. And I remember thinking about that at times. How did all that happen? Do you ever think about that? And, like, why didn't somebody say, oh, this is not right? This is completely wrong. And he completely misrepresented himself to us. And yet they're killing people in prisons. These men are just you just feel like they're following along blindly, and not just men, there were women too. So um, anyway, so the verse says so Sheba goes through all the tribes of Israel. So now Joab is after Sheba. He takes control of everything as far as leading the troops. And so Sheba is going through the 10 tribes, and he was trying to build a coalition against David. So the thing I always think there, he's going against God's anointed, right? So we know he's in trouble because he's going against the anointing, what God said. We know the kingdom was still fragile after Absalom's rebellion. The seeds of division were already there, and Sheba was exploiting them, and the rebellion is growing because of one dissenter. How do I know this? Because verse 14, and went also after him. They were gathered together and went also after him. People were still joining Sheba. Even after David had been restored to the throne, there were Israelites willing to follow another leader. This shows how quickly discontent can spread when someone offers people an alternative to God's chosen authority. They will take it. And this shows us how later they will divide and become two different nations. And it's hard for me to wrap my mind around that this little part right here really started them down the road, what they used to say, a slippery slope, right? It just takes you down really quick. And Leah's been pointing that out. And It was a picture of sin and rebellion. There's an interesting pattern. Sheba blows a trumpet, people follow him. He moves from tribe to tribe, gathering supporters. Rebellion rarely stays small, it spreads. One dissatisfied person can influence many others. That's why scripture repeatedly warns about division and strife. Always that one saying, one bad apple spoils the whole bunch. And that's really true, isn't it, Teresa? Like with fruit and stuff, if you leave one bad piece of fruit in there too long, then all of it goes bad right around that and just gets worse. Yeah.
Kids, how they'll talk each other into doing stuff.
Yes.
One bad one is a bunch.
Yes. And they lead all the others astray. Isn't that crazy? And then as adults, we're still doing it. You think we learned when we raised kids, right? So let's take a quick look and compare how David rules and how Sheba is going about his politicking. David gathered people through covenant and relationship, which is what the church, right, should do. Sheba gathered people through dissatisfaction and division. So all it takes is one of us, and we can divide. David always tried to unite. Sheba is calling for division. That contrast runs throughout the books of Samuel. And I thought, see, that's what God's always trying to do is unite us. What divided house, a house divided will not stand. So verse 14 reminds us that ideas travel, especially sinful ideas. Sheba's rebellion started with one trumpet blast in verse 1, but by verse 14 it had spread. Whether good or bad, what we believe eventually influences others. One man's rebellion became a national problem because people listened to his voice. Sheba's followers listened to the wrong voice, and it's going to carry them further than they ever intended to go. With this in mind, which voice are we going to believe? It made me think of gossip, because gossip in the scriptures is rated right up there with all the big sins. And I thought, this is why, right? Because really what they were doing was gossiping, right? And causing dissension in a group that was supposed to be united. And that's why it's listed so highly, because it's eventually going to lead to a nation being divided. And that was a big deal. So, okay, this is telling us that Joab's army surrounded the city. So this tells you there were many men with him. They built an earthen siege ramp against the wall and began breaking down the wall to capture Sheba. For the phrase, they cast up a bank, the Hebrew refers to building a siege mound or ramp of earth against the city wall so soldiers could attack it more effectively. They built a siege ramp not to get over the wall, but rather to batter the wall down to cause it to fall. I thought, boy, that must have been that seems like a crazy way to attack that. Interesting, archaeology has excavated the very place, and they discovered that the outer wall was 10 feet thick, or 3 meters thick. It was built of large stones and a slope defensive layer. It dates back to the time of the late 11th century, the exact time of David and Joab. The wall showed signs of battering, although it was designed to resist rams and scaling. This discovery matched the biblical description exactly. They found a packed earth and stone ramp directly against the wall. The ramp was 16 to 20 foot wide and 5 to 6 meters. Um, it showed how quick the construction was made. It was filled with sling stones, hammerstone debris, and other siege materials. And that was on Bible Hub. The Hebrew word in our text, solia, means a siege ramp built by piling earth, stone, and timber along troops to reach the top of the wall, or outlying battery rams to be pushed up close. It was one of the best archaeological matches to any biblical siege description. So then we go to the woman. Then cried a wise woman as they're battering down this wall out of the city. Hear me, I say, pray, I pray you unto Joab. Come near hither that I may speak with thee. And when he was come nearer to her, the woman said, Art thou Joab? And he answered, I am he. Then she said unto him, Hear the words of thine handmaid. And he answered, I do hear. Then she spake, saying, they were wont to speak an old time saying, They shall surely ask counsel at Abel. And so they ended the matter. She said, that's a little confusing to me. So let me explain. The Bible calls this woman wise. She calls to Joab somehow from atop the wall and asks him to come over and speak with her. He does, and she asks him if his name is Joab. He answers, yes, I am Joab. Then she tells him to listen what she has to say. He tells her he will listen. Go ahead and speak. So, yeah, I don't know how all that happened. It seems like, how could that happen in the midst of all that going on? But anyway, go ahead and speak your mind. Then she says to Joab, in former times, people came to Abel to seek wisdom and settle disputes. Matters were resolved here peacefully. In other words, she is saying, why are you attacking us before asking for counsel? Our city has been long known for wisdom and peacemaking. Um, Abel is the city. Abel means the meadow, and it's of the house or region of Makkah. They shall surely ask counsel at Abel. She is referring to her city, which apparently had a reputation for wisdom and settling disputes. So, what she is saying, our city is known for wisdom and peacemaking. If you had simply asked, we could have resolved this matter without tearing down the wall. Now, what is so crazy is that this is an Israelite city. It sat in the far northern part of the land near the border of neighboring peoples. So the city belonged to Israel, but because it lay on the northern frontier, its residents would have been familiar with neighboring cultures and trade routes. Border cities often became places where news, commerce, and diplomacy flowed, which may partly explain why Abel had a reputation for wisdom and counsel. Um, she says, I think we read these stories with small thinking, at least I do. These were thriving places, full of people and commerce. 2 Samuel 20:19, I am one of them that are peaceable and faithful in Israel. Thou seekest to destroy a city and a mother in Israel. Why wilt thou swallow up the inheritance of the Lord? The Hebrew words carry the idea of peaceable, faithful, trustworthy, dependable. She is saying, we are loyal Israelites. We are not rebels. This is important because Joab is pursuing Sheba, who has rebelled against David. The city itself is not in rebellion. She says, I am a mother in Israel. This phrase is unique and beautiful. A mother in Israel may mean more than she's just a mother, but that it's an important city that nurtures the surrounding communities. She is saying, you're about to destroy one of Israel's important cities. Then she asked Joab, why wilt thou swallow up the inheritance of the Lord? The phrase swallow up means to consume, destroy, or devour. The inheritance of the Lord refers to God's people and God's land. Israel belonged to the Lord. What she's asking is, why destroy God's own people to get one man? She is indeed a wise woman, and she is asking him, why is he destroying the Lord's inheritance? The wisdom of her approach, notice what she does not do. She does not insult Joab. She does not threaten him. She does not defend Sheba. And I thought, well, this is a wise woman. She's just trying to make peace. And it says in the Bible, make peace like with your neighbor whenever it's possible, because it's your neighbor and they live next door, right? And I'm thinking of that. She's just trying to make peace. Why destroy a whole city? We don't even know why you're here. So instead, she asked questions. Why destroy a peaceful city? Why destroy a mother in Israel? Why swallow up the Lord's inheritance? What if we all stopped and just thought about it a minute? So she's being a wise woman. She helps Joab separate the real problem, which was Sheba, from the innocent people in the city. In modern language, she is saying, we're loyal Israelites. This is a peaceful city that belongs to God. Why destroy all of us to capture one guilty man? Do you ever read about this wise woman in the Bible? When people write about women, I think we all need to remember her. And the scripture that came to my mind was, a soft answer turneth away wrath. And I thought, right, she just went at him softly and just, gave
She de-escalated.
she did. She de-escalated something that could have just caused a lot of lives, and these were God's people. So, yeah, she did. She de-escalated, which I think sometimes as moms we're called to do, right? A lot is let's just de-escalate this whole thing. But she just presented the facts, and the facts spoke for themselves. And Joab answered and said, Far be it, far be it, far be it from me that I should swallow up or destroy. What he's saying is essentially, I don't want the city. I only want Sheba. Her wisdom saves the city because she helps everyone identify the true issue. The matter is not so, but a man of Mount Ephraim, Sheba, the son of Bichri, my name, hath lifted up his hand against the king, even against David. Deliver him only, and I will depart from the city. And the woman said unto Joab, Behold, his head shall be thrown over the wall. Wow. Okay, then. Um, so the matter, let's see, 2 Samuel 20:14, we see Sheba as he travels north through Israel and eventually comes to the city. 2 Samuel, Joab's army arrives and lays siege to the city. Said ancient cities normally shut their gates during a siege or when an enemy army approached. So when Joab's forces arrived, the gates would almost certainly have been closed, but the Bible does not tell us exactly whether Sheba himself ordered the gates shut, whether the city leaders admitted him willingly, or whether the citizens fully understood who he was. The wise woman's words in verses 19 through 21 are important here. She presents the city as peaceable and faithful. Wow, we don't know who this woman is, but she obviously had influence. The city seems loyal to David, and now she knows why they are being besieged, and she understands the urgency of the situation. And she realizes their city will be destroyed, um, any more innocent people hurt, if this one man is not taken. Then the woman went out into all the people in her wisdom, and they cut off the head of Sheba, the son of Bichri, and cast it out to Joab. And Joab blew a trumpet, and they retired from the city, every man to his tent. And Joab returned to Jerusalem unto the king. And that was the end of that. So Joab doesn't go any further. Thank goodness he didn't. So it says this story highlights the power of diplomacy. The woman's wisdom prevents unnecessary bloodshed. And of course, it's interesting that it's a woman, but there are all kinds of smart women in the Bible. I thought, though, that she could have been tricking him when she called to him to talk. I thought about that. How did he know that she wasn't tricking him? But she says here, I'm sure he took some precaution just in case. And it shows Joab's pragmatic leadership. Once the threat is eliminated, he immediately stops the assault. It marks the end of Sheba's rebellion, restoring stability to David's kingdom. Joab is a good general, but he defies the king too often. But in this case, he has done a good thing and stabilized David's kingdom. But we will see how David takes the death of his appointed general and the hands of his fired general and the fact that the rebellion is over. She said, I think we should take a moment to understand who Sheba was. Because I remember asking her that, like, well, who was Sheba? Like, he just comes from out of nowhere, it seems like, right? And all these people are choosing him over David just all of a sudden. So she said, obviously, he was very powerful. Sheba's rebellion was a political revolt rooted in tribal rivalry. A Benjamite from the tribe of Benjamin, he was challenging David's authority at a moment when Israel was fractured and vulnerable. Saul was a Benjamite, and many of the Benjamites still resented losing royal status because Saul had been king, but God replaced him with David. So there's one of the problems, right? The Benjamites were in control under Saul, and then all of a sudden now, when Saul's out of there, then so now he's wanting the Benjamites in control. So it's a tribal rivalry and jealousy. It's like old money and new money. Saul was the old power base, and now there is a new power base, and some are mad and jealous. Sheba appears suddenly in the narrative, but is action and ambition with action and ambition and political opportunity. It doesn't give us much information other than what the Holy Spirit thinks we need to know and has room for. Had Absalom not rebelled, we probably wouldn't have even heard about him, but the war was an opportunity for Sheba to flex his political muscles, and his rallying cry was, We have no share in David, no inheritance in Jesse's son. This slogan revived old grievances and encouraged Israel to abandon David. So they didn't let that go. They weren't listening to what the Lord had to say. So, as a Benjamite, Sheba likely hoped to restore influence to Saul's tribe. But what he should have known, that we know, is that Saul was not a man after God's heart. David was. And I was thinking from what we are studying in Freedom Readers is that Judah steps up in the story of Joseph. Reuben is the firstborn, Judah is the fourth, but he suddenly steps up and becomes the spokesman for the family. Later, on Jacob's parting from this earth, he is going to prophesy to all 12 sons and to Benjamin. His prophesied Benjamin's descendants would become a fierce, warlike tribe, producing warriors and powerful leaders. Thus they did with Saul. To Judah, Jacob prophesies that they would become the tribe of kings, leadership, victory, and ultimately the messianic line. So, with this said, why did Saul become king being a Benjamite when it should have been someone from the tribe of Judah? So, then you got the other problem with people getting involved, right? We studied this when we first started in the life of David. Saul was anointed king because Israel demanded a king immediately. And God granted their request, even though the permanent royal line was always destined to come from Judah. So man got in the way, made their own decision. God said, "Let me be king." And they're like, "No, we want an earthly king." And so then things get messed up. And so I never really thought about that in the story, that the Benjamites being in charge instead of Judah. So it should have always been David. If they had waited, everything would have gone well. So Saul's kingship was temporary, transitional, and conditional, not the ultimate fulfillment of Jacob's prophecy. David was too young to be king, and I think the plan was for him to be king when he got old enough. But Israel wanted a king before it was time, and thus Saul. Okay, so now we're moving into 2 Samuel chapter 21, now as the saga continues. And we only have 4 more chapters. So this is, I guess, a note out to her, to all of us. And then we will have completed the entire life of David. I don't know where we're going to go next. And if any of you have any suggestions, let me know. So y'all can be thinking and praying about that. So chapter 21 starts a new story. It leaves Joab in the civil war that's going on, but scripture does tell us what eventually happened to Joab, but not immediately after he killed Sheba. Joab's story continues for several more chapters, and his downfall comes much later during Solomon's reign. Here's the clear structured breakdown. After killing Sheba, Joab continued as David's military commander for years. His eventual fate was execution by Solomon because Joab supported Adonijah, another son of David, attempt to seize the throne. So, kind of like Hitler, you know, they think they can take it all over, and God had to stop it at some point. So, okay, so we're in chapter 21. David avenges the Gibeonites. Then there was a famine in the days of David 3 years, year after year, and David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord answered, "It is for Saul and for his bloody house, because he slew the Gibeonites." Verse 1 describes the cause of a 3-year famine during David's reign, Saul's blood guilt for killing the Gibeonites. The famine was divine judgment. David sought God for an explanation, and God revealed that the famine was punishment for Saul's violation of Israel's ancient covenant with the Gibeonites. Now, let me ask, if David sought God for an explanation for something, can we? Yes, God created us for a relationship. Through Jesus, we can approach him and we can ask him questions, and he will answer us just like he did David. Now, this is interesting. Who were the Gibeonites? The Gibeonites were not Israelites, but were protected under a sworn oath made in Joshua's name. If you don't remember the Gibeonites specifically, you may remember the story of where they tricked Joshua into making a peace covenant sworn in the name of the Lord. After Israel destroys Jericho, and I guess that's AI. It just sounds funny now. However you say that. The Canaanite kings unite to fight Israel, but the Gibeonites choose a different strategy: deception. They disguise themselves as distant travelers. The Gibeonites fully believed Israel was going to wipe them out, so they used deception as a survival strategy. And the text makes their fear very clear once you read Joshua 9 in context. They were desperate, so they came up with a plan to deceive Israel. They wore worn out clothes, they patched their sandals, they cracked their wineskins, and they had moldy bread. Their goal was to convince Joshua that they had come from far away and were not part of the Canaanite nations Israel was commanded to destroy. But something interesting that should speak to us in that is that Israel fails to seek the Lord's counsel once again, and so they deceive him. Joshua and the leaders inspect the supplies, but do not ask God. This is the key failure of the chapter. I really want us to grasp this. We should pray about everything, even the little things um, that we think God doesn't care about, because He does. He cares about everything that concerns us. So, without asking God, Joshua is deceived by these men and he makes a covenant of peace with them. Joshua and the elders swear an oath to let the Gibeonites live. This oath is made in the name of the Lord, making it permanently binding. Here's another area where we really need to pay close attention. It tells us how seriously God takes using his name. And I've really gotten that out of the Old Testament, that his covenants and all that, he takes very seriously because he's not a man that he should lie, right? And once he makes a covenant, he keeps us. He keeps it. The deception is discovered 3 days later. Israel learns the Gibeonites are actually neighbors, cities within the land God promised Israel. The people of Israel complained, but the leaders refused to break the oath because it was sworn before God. So Joshua assigns them to permanent servitude instead of killing them. Joshua curses them to become woodcutters and water carriers for the congregation and the altar of the Lord. This punishment allows them to live, but places them in perpetual service. So at least they accomplished life, right? So, and the king called the Gibeonites and said unto them, now the Gibeonites were not the children of Israel, but the remnant of the Amorites. And the children of Israel had sworn unto them, and Saul sought to slay them in his zeal to the children of Israel and Judah. Okay, so now we're up to Saul's time, and we need to know what he did to the Gibeonites to know what is going on right here with David. Saul attacked the Gibeonites because he was trying to purge Canaanites from Israel's territory in a misguided act of religious zeal. But in doing so, he broke Joshua's ancient covenant, shed innocent blood, and brought guilt on the nation. Saul did not consult the Lord. Does this not give us insight into how we are to live our lives? We need to be consulting God daily on everything, even the little things that you think he wouldn't care about. Saul didn't do this, and he acted on his own, and God did not like it. In fact, this is one of the most important covenant violation moments in the Old Testament. The Bible gives the reason in one phrase, 2 Samuel 21:2. Saul, in his zeal for Israel and Judah, sought to slay them. So it's just like life with us, right? It's the same thing. That's what it just keeps coming through my mind. It's that we should consult him about everything and him give us peace or an answer about it. Otherwise, uh, we can make the wrong decisions. So he just wanted to purify the land of the remaining Canaanite groups. He saw them as foreigners living inside of Israel's inheritance. So he acted out of nationalistic zeal, not obedience. He ignored the covenant Joshua made centuries early. Saul's motives were religious, political, and tribal, but not righteous. Israel was commanded to destroy certain Canaanite nations, but not the Gibeonites, because Joshua had made a covenant with them. But Saul blurred the lines between God's command, his own zeal, and his own desire to strengthen his kingship. Saul wanted to unify Israel under his rule and as a Benjamite king. Saul often acted to strengthen his political position. Removing non Israelite groups may have seemed like a way to secure borders, gain support, appear spiritually zealous, so he ignored the covenant law. And remember, a covenant was sworn in God's name. It was binding forever and protected by divine authority. This is surprising because Saul did not seek God. Now I want to ask you a serious question. Are you a Saul who does our own thing and then blames God? Or are you a David? And yes, you may mess up sometimes, but your heart is after God and you seek him and don't blame him. Something to think about, even as believers. Now I thought to myself, well, what if there was a small chance that Saul didn't know of the covenant? And I looked it up, and the answer was yes. Saul absolutely would have known about Joshua's covenant with the Gibeonites because the covenant was famous, foundational, and publicly binding on all Israel. Breaking it was not an accident, it was a willful violation of a sacred oath. Are you seeing the seriousness of this? The Bible gives the summary in 2 Samuel 21 of what Saul did. It says Saul sought to slay them in his zeal for Israel and Judah. This means he tried to kill them all. He shed innocent blood and he violated a holy covenant of God. The Bible gives the summary in 2 Samuel 21 that we just read, but we will read it again. Saul sought to slay them in his zeal for Israel and Judah. Saul did not kill all the Gibeonites, but he did kill many of them, enough to create blood guilt on the land and provoke a 3-year famine in David's reign. Scripture doesn't tell us the details, but Saul killed enough of them to warrant a famine to come on the land during David's reign, which leads to an interesting question. Why during David's reign and not Saul's reign when Saul is the one who did it? Remember this before I give you the answer. God is not about punishment or for punishment's sake, for revenge. He's about restoration. He's about punishment for restoration. Saul committed the sin and David inherited the consequences, but David resolved the covenant breach. So this is interesting to think about. God did not send the famine during Saul's reign because Saul was the offender, not the repairer. I thought that was interesting.
That it's his will, not our will, also.
Yes.
And you know that whole, I don't know if it was this way when you were a kid, but if one of us did something, it spoiled it for the rest of us.
Yes.
That's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah. No, that's true. And you're right. That happens all the time, right? You know, people that you give them some freedom, right? In something like the kids at the ranch. If you gave them freedom, they were going to mess it up. And then it spoiled it for all of them. Yeah. And then none of them could do it. And yeah, so you're right. It comes back on me. So,
It's a reflection period
yeah,
that God gave them
yeah,
as a reminder. Not necessarily. I mean, it feels like a punishment. It's going to feel like a punishment.
yes.
Hey, I told you.
No, and it does ruin it for the rest of them.
Yeah.
If one of your kids does something, especially I remember that since there were 5 of us. If one of us got in trouble with something, then it was like,
Yes.
yeah, well, now you can't do that at all.
Well, it helped us keep each other in check also.
Well, it did.
Yeah. Look to what we were supposed to be doing. What we were supposed to be doing. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Yeah, like don't do that because it'll ruin it for all of us. And you knew that as kids, right? Yeah, no, that's true. So I thought that was good. Saul was the offender, but not the repairer. So God waited for a king who would seek him, listen, and make things right. Yeah, so it took somebody that had his ear, and it's just kind of the way it is. And the other thing, I think God's just. So if we believe He's just and He's God, not us, then we just also timing is everything with the Lord. And I've learned that in my life that no, He's hearing our prayers, right? But is the timing right for the prayer? And I've always seen Him just in the perfect timing. That it happened just when it needed to happen, not just for me, or John. It was for our whole family. It just was the perfect timing. And so you were glad you waited on him. This is the only place this is mentioned, Saul's attack on the Gibeonites, right here in 2 Samuel. The Lord tells David what the reason for the famine is in Israel. So David goes to the leader of the Gibeonites and works to make restitution. And we pick up there at verse 3. Wherefore David said unto the Gibeonites, what shall I do for you, and wherewith shall I make the atonement, that you may bless the inheritance of the Lord? And the Gibeonites said unto him, we will have no silver nor gold of Saul, nor of his house, neither for us shalt thou kill any man in Israel. And he said, what ye shall say, that will I do for you. And they answered the king, the man that consumed us and that devised against us that we should be destroyed from remaining in any of the coast of Israel, let 7 men of his sons be delivered unto us, and we will hang them up unto the Lord in Gibeah of Saul. whom the Lord did choose. And the king said, I will give them. Now let's look at this verse by verse. What shall I do for you, and wherewith shall I make the atonement that you may bless the inheritance of the Lord? David is asking, what justice is required? How can I repair Saul's sin against you? How can the land be cleansed so God will bless Israel again? To make atonement here means to remove the blood guilt and restore covenant order so the famine can end. Bless the inheritance of the Lord means, oops, uh, stop the famine, restore rain, restore God's favor on Israel. David is not negotiating, he is acknowledging guilt and seeking the remedy. Famine was a serious thing in ancient days. It would mean certain death. Today, we have global food systems, international aid, transportation networks, and scientific tools that prevent local crop failure from becoming mass starvation. When famine does happen, nations respond with emergency food, humanitarian aid, international relief organizations, agricultural support, economic intervention. In other worlds, it's a much smaller world than in ancient times. So David must satisfy God's anger, someone for the injustice done in his name, or people will die. This is very serious. It asks them um, if they will take more. And the Gibeonites said unto him, we will have no silver or gold of Saul, nor of his house. And he said, what ye shall say, that will I do. So verse 4 is a little hard to understand. So here's what it's saying in modern English. The Gibeonites basically told David, look, we don't want Saul's money. We don't want anything from his family wealth. And we don't want you going out and killing random Israelites on our behalf. That's not justice. We just want you to do whatever is right to fix what Saul did. And David replied, whatever you say is needed to make this right, I'll do. So they are saying they don't want money or land or compensation, political favors, or even revenge on random Israelites. They want justice, not a payoff. Well, Saul is dead. So now, how can they get justice? Well, for them, justice means the offender's house being addressed and the offender being Saul. It wasn't always what it was cracked up to be. Being king in those days, if you were taken over by another king, you would be killed and all of your household. So they answered the king, King David, the man that consumed us and devised against us, that we should be destroyed from remaining in any of the coast of Israel. This shows they understand covenant law, and this is the only description of Saul's attack in the entire Bible. Let 7 men of his sons be delivered unto us, and we will hang them as unto the Lord in Gibeah of Saul, whom the Lord did choose. And David said, I will give them. They request 7 descendants of Saul. Let 7 men. Okay, we read that. This may seem unjust to us, but in ancient days, under covenant law, this is covenant restitution, not revenge. They ask for 7 men. Again, they know something about covenant law. Why 7? 7 equals covenant number, it equals completeness, and it equals full satisfaction of justice. Thought that was interesting. When the Gibeonites asked for descendants of Saul, they weren't being vengeful, they were being legal. Saul was already dead, but the guilt of what he did didn't disappear with him. In the ancient world, especially in Israel's covenant system, a man's wrongdoing was tied to his house, his family line. So if the offender died before justice could be carried out, the responsibility fell on his household. This was the only way to remove blood guilt when the guilty party was gone. So when they asked for 7 of Saul's sons, they were basically saying Saul committed the crime, but he's gone. Justice still has to be done, and it has to come from the place where the sin came from, his family. Have you ever thought that there are countries today, modern cultures, that still operate with this family responsibility or family justice, but none of them function exactly like ancient Israel's covenant law? In the ancient world, especially in the Near East, a person wasn't just an individual, they were part of a house, a clan, a tribe, and a lineage. If someone committed a serious offense, the responsibility didn't stop with them. It extended to their family because the family was seen as the source of a person's identity, protection, and authority. Today, most Western nations don't operate like that. If someone commits a crime, that's because modern law is built on individual rights and individual accountability. But in some parts of the world, especially in tribal or honor-based societies, the idea of family responsibility still exists. Not in the exact same way as Saul's situation, but close enough that you can see the resemblance. For example, in some Middle Eastern, African, and Southern Asian tribal communities, if one person harms another, the offended family may demand restitution from the offender's entire clan, not just the individual. In some places, reconciliation between families requires compensation, mediation, or symbolic acts that involve the whole household. In extreme cases, feuds can last generations because the wrongdoing is seen as tied to the family line. These systems aren't about revenge, they're about restoring honor, balance, and justice within the community. It's a very old way of thinking, and it's still alive in pockets of the world, but no modern nation practices anything like what happened in 2 Samuel, where descendants are executed to remove blood guilt. This was part of a unique covenant system between God and Israel. I'm going to see if I, Teresa, that made me think of, what was feuds, family feuds, of years ago. Yes, because it used to be like a whole family, like, right? It didn't matter that these were the kids, and it just kept going. Do you ever remember anything about? Did you know anybody that had family feuds? And
There were sometimes like the neighbors, because back years ago, you kept your land, and generally your children stayed on that land, and their children. And if there was a feud against a neighbor, it kind of hung there.
okay, yeah,
And it had to have been passed down by mouth as time went on, because the grandkids were alive when it happened.
right, right. But you don't, of course, you don't hear anything about that now. But some of it's just getting away from family. We're not as connected. But I remember the Hatfields and the McCoys, and I never really understood why they just kept feuding year after year. So,
It was just by mouth. It was passed down. You
yeah,
can't trust them. Don't you do nothing with them. Well,
yeah,
they grew up being pumped into you, so to speak.
yeah. Just raising up that anger and discontent. And yeah, um, I think we're going to have to, yeah, we're going to have to stop there because we got to quit early now. Okay. All right.